Hey, how's it going? It's Edwin. Thank you guys for viewing this video. This is how to edit in Adobe Premiere Pro. I made this video mainly for students who want a refresher on Adobe Premiere Pro who have never used it before. This tutorial will be sort of basic. It'll be sort of the essential parts of working in Adobe Premiere Pro. And then later on, I'll just keep building and adding on to it. But we're going to start from the very basic, and then we're going to move on from there. All right, so first step when you're working on Adobe Premiere Pro is to just make sure that you set yourself up for success. And how to do that is to maintain organization. And so before we even start working on Adobe Premiere Pro, what I'm going to do is create a folder where I want to save my project. While we do that, I am going to open up Adobe Premiere Pro. Sometimes, depending on the computer you have, it may take a while to load. It's a bit of a heavy program for a lot of computers to use. So I'm just going to click on it now and get that window queued up. And so while that's waiting to do its magic, we're going to go to Finder. Also, if you have a Windows at home, I'm sorry, I do not have a Windows computer. What I would suggest is to follow along here and then look at another tutorial for how to essentially do some of the things I'm doing on a Windows computer. So like things like importing should be relatively similar. There's a lot of shortcuts that I think are similar, but I'm not exactly sure. So if they're not working for you, my suggestion would be to just do a quick Google search. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that shows you how to work in Adobe Premiere Pro for Windows. All right, so continuing on. So this is the screen for Adobe Premiere when it's ready to load. This is the 2019 version. And so like I said, we're going to start off with creating a folder structure. And this is good because you want to maintain organization because it gets very, very easy to lose files if you are not organized. I've seen people lose files because they've worked on multiple computers and then forgot to make sure that they're saving in one specific thing, like an external hard drive. And so some of their files are saved to one computer while some of their files are saved to another one. It gets very, very messy very quickly. And so the main thing with editing is to make sure you're organized and that everything is in one place so that you avoid any sort of potential loss of assets. And so I have my external hard drive. This is called the G Drive USB over here. This is where I'm going to be saving my project towards. So I'm going to create a new folder in this external hard drive I have. New folder up here. Let's call this Premiere Pro Tutorial. All right, so this is where I'm going to save all my assets. So now that I have this folder, this is just folder number one. We're going to create a whole bunch of different folders within this folder. This is the folder I'm going to go to for this specific project. And so in this folder, I'm going to create another folder, and I'm going to call this one Project Files. Oops. Project Files. This is where I'm going to place all of my project files for Adobe. A project file for Adobe Premiere Pro is essentially like a shortcut to opening up the program for the specific project you're working on. And so this is where I'm going to save over here, and I'll show you how to do that later. I'm going to create another one called Footage. This is where we're going to keep all of our footage. I'm going to create another one called Audio to keep all our audio. One called Exports for exporting our footage. We're going to send it there. Make one called Photos in case we have any photos we're going to use while editing. Sometimes you have random pieces of documents that you may need for whatever reason, and so I'll keep one for documents. If you're doing some sort of special compositions on Adobe After Effects, you may want to create an After Effects folder. But overall, this is pretty much the basics of what you need. A main folder for your project folder, and then the subfolders for all the assets for your project. Main assets being audio, exports, footage, photos, and project files, and then documents if you have like a bunch of random documents as well. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to open up Adobe Premiere Pro. This is the first window that you see when you first open up. And usually it's empty. Since I've been working on a few different things, there's things already there. You're going to go to where it says New Project and click on that. Give your project a name. So I'm going to call this Premiere Pro Editing. Over here. Now this is important. You want to make sure that the location that you save this to is the location that you created for that folder structure I was talking about. So we're going to save it in the project files folder here. So hit browse. Obviously, it's being saved to the wrong place, so we want to make sure it's being saved to the right one. So we're going to go up to Premiere Pro tutorial here. So you can see I already started a folder called video editing tutorial, but I decided to put it all in this one instead. I'm going to save it to project files, choose. We're going to go over to scratch this. So this is all fine. You don't have to touch anything here. This is typically fine as well. Everything is saved to project. So everything here is going to save to this project files folder, which is what you want. The main thing is making sure that the project autosave is also saved to this folder, because you want to make sure you know where that is. This is going to be a lifesaver for you at times, especially if you're working on bigger projects, because Adobe Premiere Pro, as good of a program as it is, it does crash a lot. And sometimes if you don't set an autosave is pretty much like an allotted time that you give the program to autosave your project so that you don't accidentally forget to save. And if the program crashes, you don't lose all your files. This is kind of like a backup for saving. And so usually I set mine to every 15 minutes. I'll show you guys how to do that. But just make sure you know where this is being saved to, because you will need to use this at some point. All right. And I think we're good here, so we're going to hit OK. And here we are. We're in Adobe Premiere Pro. The first window that's highlighted is your project file folder or area. This is the area that you're going to keep all your assets. So when you import your media, all the footage is going to go here. The audio, text, so on and so forth is going to go here. The timeline is where you're going to be editing your footage over here. This is where you're going to be seeing your footage from the timeline. And this is where you see your footage, pretty much a preview of the footage when you select footage or audio from the project browser over here. This is also an area where you can adjust your controls for videos and audio, and I'll show you that later on. And at the top over here, you see that there's a bunch of tabs. And so these tabs, this is great. Premiere Pro they've really done a really good job of trying to kind of streamline the post-production process and making it clear and concise. And so every step in the post-production process is kind of laid out for you here. So we're starting in editing later on. Usually once you have some sort of footage laid out and you have a good expectation of where everything is and how everything is going to be, and you're ready to sort of move on to the next step, which is coloring all your footage, you go to this tab. This tab has special effects. This tab you can work on audio, so on and so forth. So this is just a nice, clear, expedited process for editing, and we're going to be staying in this tab for this series. And we might go over to color to do some color correcting as well, actually. All right, and so we're going to move on to importing the media. And so if you double-click on this screen, I double-clicked, it pops up the import window. You can also right-click. If you right-click, you can import as well. You can also go up to File and go down to where it says Import, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Command-I for Mac. I'm not sure what this is for Windows. Again, if you have a Windows computer, I would suggest following along with this tutorial or seeking one on YouTube that's more Windows driven. Obviously, it won't be me talking, so it's not the familiar voice, but I do recommend, if you have a Windows computer at home, which I'm sure many of you do, there's plenty of video tutorial YouTube videos for Windows. But you can follow along here, and then maybe you can learn a few things here and then find out how to convert that to Windows. Whatever you choose, I'm just letting you know that Macs and Windows are different. In Premiere Pro, a lot of things are similar. Some things are different, so I'm not really sure where that lies within Windows Premiere Pro. Anyway, so keyboard shortcut is also Command-I for importing. I usually just like to stick with double-clicking here. It just seems the most efficient thing to do. And we're going to find some footage to import. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to import yet. I'm going to just find something really quickly. Let's find something from my India footage. Raw footage. As you can see, my file structure is always similar. No matter what project I work on, this always remains constant because you always want to stay organized. And this is more organization here. Let's go up to, let's see, what's a fun day? Let's go to day 8. And then I have my clips here. So these are, so the reason I have clip and proxies, these are both the same type of clips. I mean, this has nothing to do with video editing. I'm just showing you what I have laid out here. My clip folder is the raw footage from my trip. This is also like raw 4K footage. And the proxies are essentially downsized to be able to handle being edited. So these are, I believe, 720p resolution footage. Just because it's a lot easier to be able to work with this than it is to be able to work with a 4K footage in Premiere Pro, especially on my computer. Essentially, the slower your computer is, the harder it is to handle 4K footage. So creating processes is very helpful. I'm just gonna use a couple different clips. Let's see. I think these clips are good because there's a series of them. Or I'll just use this one here. So as you can see, I hit OK. It's importing the footage here. My footage winds up here. Awesome. And so once your footage is in this window, if you double click it, it pops up right over here. If I play it.
Sorry, I'm tearing my arm hairs out. Killing me.
The footage plays. The reason the quality looks terrible is because it's only at a fourth of the resolution it should be. And this is also, I believe this is actually 540p because I actually downsized it in incorrect resolution. That's why there's these black bars on the side, which is fine. You know, it's whatever. But anyway, so that's why if I hit it to full, what happens is I get to see the footage in full resolution, but it's also, it processes much slower. It looks pretty good there, though. So anyway, this is the footage we're going to work with. The reason I'm choosing to work with this footage is because I've seen it before. I've worked on it, and I know that I do a few different things. You know, wide shot, close-up shot. Probably a good thing to talk about when it comes to editing. And so I'm going to use this footage for this example. All right, so if you look in effect controls here, let me double-click it again. Actually, let me bring it onto the timeline. So the way I like to bring my footage into the timeline is there's a bunch of different ways. Drag and drop is a classic way. Click it, drag it, drop it. Boom, the footage is there. What happens when you do this is that there is notice these icons and just try to remember the differences in the icon. When you drag a project or footage onto the timeline, it creates a sequence. This is called a sequence. You can have more than one sequence. So a sequence essentially is just the place where you're editing your footage from. And so this icon for the sequence is like these three, I don't know, rectangular boxes stacked on top of each other. And then, so that's the icon for when something is a sequence. And so I'm going to just call this editing tutorial sequence. And over here is our footage, and the icon for the footage is that film strip with the waveform in the front. That means when there's both the footage and the waveform, that means there's both video and audio. When it's just waveform, it means it's just audio. When there's just film, it just means it's just video. And so that's pretty much how you create. That's how you get started on Premiere Pro, organizing, opening up Premiere Pro, importing your footage, and then putting that footage into the sequence for editing. So now we're here in the sequence tab where we have our footage. As I tried to show you before, if I click here, not only is this a preview window, but it's also a window to adjust your footage. So if I double click here, now I can see my footage here as well. And so when I look at my footage here, there's things I can do, such as going to the effect controls and then adjusting how my footage looks. So let's say, for example, I wanted to scale my footage up or down, either zoom in or zoom out of my footage. What I could do is use this scale and use this slider. So if I slide it to the right, I zoom in. If I slide it to the left, I zoom out. If you hit this at 100%, it goes back to normal. So that is a useful tool that you may need to use at some points, or that you want to use for like an effect. If you wanted to use this specific setting as an effect, what you can do is you can create what's called keyframes. And so how you do that is there's this little stopwatch over here. Click on that. As you can see, this red line has shown up above the area of my footage. This means that this now needs to be rendered. We're altering the footage, and when you alter footage in Premiere Pro, sometimes a lot of times it's fine. It usually doesn't do what it's doing now off of just one single keyframe. I think I think the footage that I'm using, because it's already been downsized and converted, I think maybe there's something there. So anyway, I need to render this footage. So now when I play it, it might play a little. It's actually doing really fine. But usually when you see that red line, it means it needs to be rendered. And I'll show you what that means later. All right. So anyway, moving on to what I was just doing. So I set one keyframe at the beginning here. So I click this stopwatch at the very beginning of this clip here, right? And so look at this. This is called the playhead. This little blue line is called the playhead. So I'm going to move my playhead over. And you notice that it's moving over here because this is kind of a representation of what's happening down here. And so when I move my playhead over and I change this value, so at the beginning it's at 100. Let's change it right now to 120, just to show you what I'm doing here. So I just changed it to 120. As you notice, when I change it to 120, a keyframe popped up here. These little things, these little diamonds are called keyframes. And so once I change that value, it changed. So notice the number as I'm sliding it back to the beginning, right? It's decreasing. So what that's doing there is it's essentially creating a keyframe between the first part of the footage that I highlighted and hit the stopwatch for, and then the end of the footage where I raised up the value 20 20 points. And so here's how that looks now.
Sorry, I'm tearing my arm hairs out. It's killing me.
I'll let you watch it again. Notice the black bars. The black bars are the one that's going to give it away. So it's a little bit more of a subtle zoom, so you can't really tell. But the black bars are what's give it away. So watch it again. As you can see, I'm zooming in. So yes, you might find that useful. I use that a lot for different things, repositioning or cropping things. There's a lot of different reasons to use a scale, but this is essentially how you would use it. So let's say, for example, if I didn't like what I did there, like let's consider this an accident. What you could do, if you hit Command Z, again, I'm not sure what it is on a Windows, but if you use Command Z on a Mac, what it does, this is about to disappear. Command Z, boom, it's gone. So what I just did there is if I didn't like something and I want to go back a step, if you hit Command Z, it undoes the last thing that you did. And if you keep hitting Command Z, it'll just eventually undo everything that you did. And I think there's a limit to it. I think it's like the last 20 things you did, it'll stop, but I'm not exactly sure on that. All right, so I'm going to redo it. You can also hit Shift Command Z if you wanted to do it. So either selecting this over here on Edit or Shift Command Z will bring it right back. Boom. All right, a few things from the Effect Controls tab other than the scale to note is the position. And so this is when you want to reframe a shot, you can use the X and Y axis to reframe. So if I grab this X axis, you can see it moving left and right. Grab the Y axis, move it left and right. You can see it goes up and down. Rotation. And again, you can use the keyframes on all of this. So that same concept I showed you about keyframing here, you can apply to all these things that has a stopwatch right next to it. Rotation. So if I move this to the right, it rotates. This to the left, it rotates. These are pretty much the main three things that you have to remember, because you'll be using, especially scale and position, you'll be using these a lot. Rotation, sometimes if you want to go for some crazy effects. So just make note of those three things. You'll be using it a lot. Down over here in the editing sequence, there's a few different tools that you should make note of. And so I'll start with the blade tool, because this is a tool you'll be using a lot. This is kind of the first tool you'll learn when you start editing, is the blade tool. So I click on this tool. I can also, if I highlight over certain things, like certain buttons, you'll see in parentheses that there is a letter associated with it. So if you see where Freud's tool says C, if I hit C, that tool comes up. This is the selection tool. If I hit V, that tool comes up. So I'm going to hit C. the blade tool comes up, right? And let's just do a quick little cut. So I'm going to cut. So before I even zoom in, I don't want to show the zoom in. I want to kind of stop. So let's say I'm going to cut here. And let's say I want to make another cut. Let's see, once I zoom. All right, let's go with that. So I'll make another cut here. So let's say if I'm done making my cuts and I want to go back to the selection tool, just hit V, and now you're back using the arrow. And so I'm going to just make sure that the clip that I want to delete is highlighted, and I'm going to hit Option Delete on my keyboard, and it's going to delete the footage and then compress them so that the footage essentially comes close. I'm going to undo this by using Command Z. If I just highlighted this and deleted, this is what happens. Now there's like a black mark, a black area between my two clips. And if I wanted to, I can highlight that black area and I can delete that, and now the clips are conjoined. And so let's view it again. Let's see our cut. Pretty clean. So notice that because the sound, notice that the sound is a constant throughout, which helps us hide the cut a little bit. I'm not sure if you heard that. Let me raise up the volume a little bit. All right, so listen to this. So this is a very simple cut, but this is what we're using. The audio bed underneath, that constant water running sound, helps that cut seem more smooth. If it was, I'm going to take real quick just to show you. If I hit Option, if I hold down Option and I select a certain clip, it'll just select that lone clip. So now let's talk about fading in and fading out, because that's good to do. So real quick, I just want to kind of start from scratch again. And so if you hit this button, it'll just start your footage back from scratch. I'm going to hit it here also. And then I'm going to just unselect this stopwatch so that it gets rid of the keyframe, so it's not zooming in. And now we're kind of back to basic here. And so let's do a quick easy fade in and a fade out. So fade in, what you want to do is get your mouse to be in the beginning of the clip. Right click. Oop, just auto saved as you saw there. Right click, hit apply default transitions. And apply default transition is pretty much just a fade in. And so now if I hit the space bar, nice little fade in. Let's do a fade out. So right click at the end of the clip, apply default transitions. Let's go to the very end of the clip. Nice little fade out there. So that's how you do fade ins and fade outs. Let me just cover a little bit more about what's on the timeline. Over here to the right is where your audio meter is. And the higher it goes, the hotter it gets. And the hotter it gets, the redder it gets. And if it hits where it's hitting now, that means it's too loud. And so what you want to do in this situation when you're looking at your audio meter is you want to reduce the audio so that it's hitting around -12. This green over here is good. You want essentially dialogue audio to be right around here. Ambient sound maybe a little lower, but you don't want it to be too high because it's going to start peaking and distorting if it gets up here. So we're just going to lower that. And so how we do that is, if you notice, there's these lines over here. I'm going to just move this down like so. And now you see that this appears here. The waveform audio appears, and there's like a white line that appears. If you click and hold on this, it actually brings the volume up or down. I'm going to bring it down. Like now it's hovering around -12. That's good. That's better. All right, what else? These eyeballs, these are essentially to make the image disappear for a bit if you don't want to see it, or reappear if you do want to see it. So if I hit this eyeball, it just goes black. If I open it up again, there's the image. In case you need to lock your footage because you need to move some things around, or you just want to make sure the footage doesn't get adjusted accidentally, if you lock this down, now you can't do anything to the footage. So let me show you guys how to render now. So to render, go to the beginning of the clip that you want to start rendering, and then the end of the other clip. So I went to the beginning by using my up and down arrows on my keyboard, and I hit I in the very beginning for in, and I'm going to use the down arrow to go at the end of my clip, and I'm going to press O for out. And so as you see up here, now we have this section of the timeline highlighted. If I had another clip, let's say, for example, I'm just going to extend this clip if I can or not. Let me just actually bring this clip further out over here and hit the O button. So wherever I choose to put this out point and wherever I choose to put this in point, I can just by simply pressing I for in and O for out. So right now I'm just going to go back to the beginning of the clip. Let me just lower my volume so that the sound of the running water doesn't make my ears bleed. All right, so I put the in point at the beginning there. Let me put the O point at the end there. And so I'm going to go up to where it says sequence and where it says render in to out. So when I hit that, this rendering window pops up. It tells you how long you need to let the video render in order to preview it. The longer the video, the more the rendering. Of course, 5 seconds is really 10. And there it is.
Tearing my arm hairs out, killing me.
So I showed you guys how to fade in and fade out. I told you guys a little bit about the volume, more about the timeline. Let me show you guys how to save now. Saving is very important. So this, as you notice, the program auto-saved for me a few times. So real quickly, how to just save. Hit Command S. This one will pop up. Now you just saved your project. Command S. Autosave is also very important because sometimes if you're really into your project, you forget to save entirely. So what you want to do is go up to where it says Premiere Pro, Preferences, go down to Autosave. My computer is really going slow now. All right, so now we're in the autosave window. As you can see, I have it automatically save every 15 minutes, a maximum of 20 copies of project files. Just in case you may need one, you may need to go back a day or two, but not 7 days back and not 2 days back for whatever reason. So I have 20 copies. I'll show you how that looks like, but I set my autosave to every 15 minutes. Sometimes if you're working like really extensively on things, you're making very small adjustments everywhere in a quick period of time. If you edit quickly, you may want to change this to 10 or 5 minutes, but I like 15. 15 is fine. Actually, let's stick to 10. 10 seems better. I'm going to hit OK on that. And so if anything should fail and if my Premiere Pro should crash before I forget to save, now I know that I can at least go back to 10 minutes prior. So let me show you guys how that looks like on the Finder. So if I hit the Finder window, go up to Premiere Pro Tutorial. If I go to where it says Project Files, that folder that we saved when we were initially checking to make sure that the autosave folder is saving and the same as the project folder. Here's that folder now, and now here are my autosaves. 1025, 1051 from earlier. Here's my project that I saved at 1225 at the same time. So, yeah, so these are my files, my project files, and my autosave files in case my project files gets corrupted or crash or I forget to save. Anyway, that's it for right now. I will be coming at you with more. Let me know what else you guys want to hear about when it comes to video editing, and I'll make sure to do a video on it. Thank you.